first of all, thank you so much for coming out and seeing my talk. Before I get into like who I am, can I just get like a quick sense of like who is everyone here in the group? If you're a Tech Academy student, can you raise your hand? Cool. And then if you saw this on Meetup and came out of the stream, I'm guessing it's everyone else. Awesome. And I'm guessing mostly like entry level junior developers, people who are kind of looking to break into this career field. Cool. Awesome. Awesome. Let me tell you a little about myself. I'm going to get straight to the point. I don't have a computer science degree. I'm an Epicodus grad. Screen. Oh, yeah. You know, could help. We got some slides here. They're not the most exciting slides, so you didn't miss anything. But yes, I don't have a computer science degree. I went to Epicodus, which is a coding boot camp here in Portland. They're a couple blocks away from here. I graduated in June of 2016, and while I was there, I did the PHP Drupal track. It also covered your standard web technologies, JavaScript, CSS, HTML. So I am now a senior front-end engineer. I work at an agency here in town called Basalt. For those who aren't familiar with that term, agency, what that means is that our company, we offer software support and engineering support to other companies that have products. So some of the clients that I've worked with, City of Portland, AAAS, which is Science Magazine, Puppet, which is down the street from here, Memorial Sloan Kettering. So a lot of kind of large companies hire us out for our services. What I do specifically, I have a couple areas of interest that I specialize in, and that Basalt as a company specializes in. So first and foremost is design systems. Really what that is a fancy term for front-end architecture and front-end at large scale for large enterprise companies. So how do you manage the design of the website, how it looks, how you get all that front-end facing stuff out, but at a company with a huge amount of websites, where it becomes really hard to maintain at that scale. Along with that, a lot of building of front-end libraries, so just collections of UI components, stuff like that. Also some front-end applications, Reacts. I've done some stuff with peer-to-peer marketplaces, dashboards, informational things, things like that. I also specialize in some DevOps stuff, so setting up scripting, setting up Docker deployments, that kind of stuff, setting up testing architecture. And I'm also a technical lead on several projects. So that means I actually have other developers underneath me, and I help mentor them. I help make sure that they have the resources that they need to be able to successfully do their job. I had to help manage writing tickets, all those sorts of things that go into leading other developers. So what are the goals of my talk today? I want to share some strategies for success because I was very lucky in my career that I had a lot of people around me who took the time to give me advice and to help me out and mentor me. That was really valuable to me, so this is me kind of paying it forward. I also wanted to dispel some common misconceptions. I think that making a career change into any career is challenging. It's overwhelming. It can be really tough. Going into tech can be overwhelming and tough. There are misconceptions around it that I think can really frighten people, and I want to get rid of those misconceptions. And then finally, I want to make sure I answer any of your questions. I know that going into this is a really big unknown. I've been in your shoes, and I remember kind of this like, I'm taking a leap of faith, and I have no idea what I'm jumping into. So if I can be a resource here to kind of answer any questions you guys have about anything related to the tech field, I'm happy to do that. So I'm going to start with just debunking a couple myths out there. Then I'm going to go over a couple strategies of things that work well. So the first kind of myth that I want to pop right away is that technical skill is everything. This sounds a little counterintuitive because obviously, a lot of you have signed up to be in a coding boot camp and to learn how to code. And it does sort of feel like a prerequisite. What I would say is that there is, for an entry-level junior developer, there is a basic level competency that you are going to need to be comfortable doing your job. But junior developers are not hired to be technical experts, right? So you do not need to have a mastery of React or CSS or any of those things. Employers are not looking for that. If they wanted somebody who is an expert in their field, they will find a senior developer. Your relative confidence, knowledge, as it is compared to other people, I have a typo here, it does not correlate to your career success, right? So big thing that I would tell people is don't compare yourself to other people. Everybody in this industry has different growth curves. They have different environments that they do really well in, and they're at different points in their learning careers. So I went through Epicodus boot camp. My wife went through it as well. I've had several friends who've gone through coding boot camps, and I have coworkers that have gone through coding boot camps. And so I feel like I've had a pretty large sampling here to pull from. I have seen a lot of people that were in the middle of their cohort or kind of in the back of their cohort. They struggled a lot with the tasks. They didn't feel like they got everything. They kind of felt like they only understood 50% of it. And now, 2 years later, they're doing really, really well in their careers. On the flip side of that, I'll give a fair warning. There are people who go to boot camps who have some prior knowledge and they feel very confident and comfortable with the material. And then they kind of check out and cruise through it, and they don't do well in their career path. So do yourselves a favor and don't compare yourself to other people. Just compare yourself to where you were 2 weeks ago, a month ago. If you feel like you're learning, that's all you need to keep doing. Just keep doing that. You're on the right path. Kind of getting back to this technical skills and everything. Software development in the real world does not happen in a vacuum. It is not just about writing code. We don't write code just for the sake of writing beautiful code. There are business needs, there are human interests, there are other things that have to happen. Software is written as part of business, right? So what does that mean? That means that there are other skills that you can bring to the table that will give you a huge amount of advantage. For example, communication skills. Can you respond to an email? Can you listen to a client's needs, figure out what they want, and deliver what that is needed? That's a really valuable skill, and being able to bring that to the table at the beginning is really going to give you a leg up, way more than saying, hey, I've really mastered the finest details of React. Those fine details of React, you can Google them. You can't Google how to have these other soft skills as well. And then developers spend about half their time on Google. I think this is a good thing to kind of point out. I actually worked at a company that briefly asked us to use a tracking software. It wasn't reported back up to management, but they're like, hey, can you just throw this on your computer out of curiosity? Where are you spending your workday? Across the board, from junior developers up to senior developers, it was roughly about half their time is on Google, searching things for Stack Overflow and searching other articles on how to do things, right? So even the best experts in this field don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of coding. I think there's a little bit of this misconception of like, oh, well, you should know how to do a binary sort algorithm off the top of your head, otherwise you won't get a job. That's a little ridiculous. I've never needed to do a binary sort, and if I did, I could Google it. So myth busted. All right, next myth that I kind of want to talk about.
Can I ask questions?
Sure, absolutely, please.
So looking at job descriptions, they're heavy on the technical side.
Yes.
When you look at a job description, so what you're explaining here, it was definitely awesome. Because yes, you're right. You don't have to do a binary search, but yet that's what the job descriptions are basically leading onto. So how did you get how did you get that first job? I might be jumping the gun, but how did you get that first job based on what you just described?
Sure. So I think there's a little bit to unpack there. One, I'm going to say that job descriptions are notoriously inaccurate. Generally, when people sit down to write a job description, they get like 4 or 5 people get in a room and they're like, what would be our ideal candidate? And they end up describing like their rock star candidate. I really don't ever see people who like perfectly fit into any box, right? So I wouldn't consider any job listing as like a punch list of hard requirements, right? I would get it as a sense of like, this is what they would generally like. If you meet 60% of the requirements, you have enough of the technical skills. You can learn the rest. And employers know this, right? Like they'll write it on a job description, but generally they know when you come through the door that you're not going to have mastery of every single line item there. There are things you're going to be better at, things that you're not going to be as good at. And yeah, you know, I would be suspicious about a job description for a junior entry level that is listing very intense technical requirements. If an employer says we want a junior developer who has 5 years of experience and has mastered CSS and knows React and can handle this backend framework and can deploy things, that's not something you want to apply to, because what they want is a senior developer and they don't know what your job is. That's the kind of employer you want to avoid. So, you know, I think there's a little bit give and take in that. Does that kind of roughly answer your question?
Kind of,
And
but
hopefully
it's
some of
like
these other
coming in
tips,
the door, you know, to get, because they spend about 7 seconds on your resume.
Sure.
So I don't want to.
Well, I think that
get off
this
in
is
the weeds.
that's a great segue to my next kind of section here. So, networking isn't for you. I think that when we traditionally hear the term networking, we think of like this very like, oh, I went to a meetup that was for networking and we all had business cards ready and I like, you know, like a speed dating thing where you like shake hands and stuff. It's not that. What networking is basically just having relationships in your professional career life. And I read an interesting statistics that I totally believe. I wish I could remember the exact number, but it's in the Portland market in like 2018, they did a survey of tech jobs and they found that 80% of the positions out there were never posted in the first place, right? So looking for those like, hey, somebody posted on Craigslist or LinkedIn or a job board, a listing, you're already looking at only about a fifth of what gets filled. So how do those other places get filled? They get filled through people and networking. So let me kind of give a good example of, you know, we have a theoretical company and they have 3 clients and all of a sudden they have a 4th client come to the door and say, hey, like, we have this big project when we want to hire you. Can you give us a mid-level developer? Our company will say yes, and then they're going to need somebody in 2 weeks. So in a 2-week period, we're not going to go onto Craigslist and put up a listing and wait a month for a bunch of people to apply, and then to like kind of slowly go through those resumes and read it. Like, that's not, you know, what we're going to do is walk over to the developers and say, hey, developers, does anybody know here like a good developer that's available? And some of us, you know, raise their hand and say, "Oh yeah, I know my buddy Jessica. You know, she just graduated from code school. I'm gonna hire her." That happens a lot. So that's how I got my first job. You were asking. When I was in code school, I went to a meetup frequently, and I basically told people that I was at code school and that I would want a job soon. And then when it came that time, I announced that I would be looking for jobs. And I asked somebody there who owned a company if they would, you know, give me a half hour of their time to give me some advice. And by the end of that half-hour meeting, I had a job. So networking, very, very powerful. it's networking is also, I think that there's a misconception that networking is something that is intrinsic to people, that some people are good at it, some people are bad at it, and that's just how the fates are, and you have to go with that. I adamantly disagree about that. I think that networking and face-to-face interactions, it's a skill to be learned and worked and improved on. I am much more comfortable now at my age and at this time in my life to get up here and talk to people and interact with people. I've not always been like this. I was actually a huge introvert. It was not until I was done with college that I kind of started forcing myself to be more open and outgoing and talking to people. So I get that it's really scary to go to a meetup or go into something, where you're meeting new people and putting yourself out there. That's not everyone's cup of tea. But don't dismiss it, because there are strategies to learn how to do that better. And I'm happy to share some of those strategies, but do it. It's really, really useful. Finally, have a community. It's going to make this whole process easier. Your career is going to be so much better if you have people that you can at least occasionally talk to that understand what you're going through and are in this field with you. How much your first job pays is important. Having gone through code school, there was a lot of this discussion of like, well, how much do you think we should get? And I heard this person got a job for $80,000, so I will refuse to take any job that pays less than 65. Or these statements of, how much are you going to make in your first job? It makes a lot of sense. I'll be pretty blunt. A lot of people go into the tech field in large part because it does pay well. But I would challenge you, first of all, I would say meet your basic financial goals. That's really important. I don't want anybody to feel here that I'm saying go take a job that pays $10 an hour. We all do need to pay the bills. But who you work for in your first job is going to be way, way, way more important. The team that you work with, if they support you and mentor you and give you opportunities for your career to grow, you're going to grow your skills and you're going to grow your value a lot faster. So one way to think about this is not what is this job going to pay me, but what is the compensation that this job is going to give me. And compensation can be money, but compensation can also be experience. It can be support. It can be the clients that you're working with if you're trying to build a portfolio that impresses people. Those things really, in the long run, will help you out a lot. I know people who came out of code school and they found a job at a tiny startup that had investor funding, and they were offered $100,000 a year, and they were like, wow, this is awesome. They went there, they got zero support, they learned nothing for about 9 months. Then the company went under, and then they're right back on the market with 9 months of atrophied skills. And their confidence is shot because they're like, well, I didn't really write code for 9 months because they couldn't get their shit together. And then they've kind of shot themselves in the foot, right? And so, chasing the money didn't help them out. On the flip side, for example, I only made $30,000 my first year in this career, which is not a lot of money. But what I did do in that first year was that I grew my skills immensely. I built a beautiful portfolio of work, and I became comfortable with myself as a developer and confident. And when I left at that end of that year, I had a very strong sense of my value is, and I was able to demand a much higher price very easily, right? So taking a 20 or 30 or 40K hit that first year might make you might make up that difference in the next 5 years after that if you grow your skills. So yes, I would not say how much your job pays is important for your first job. All right, so this one, I hate to have to put this one on here, but it's actually a legit thing. I don't know how many people followed the Iowa caucuses, but there's this sort of like, you got to be viable, you got to get 15% on the first round. So sadly, having interviewed many people, this is a viable thing. More than 50% of people that I've interviewed have had this issue. So yes, personal hygiene and professionalism are not optional, especially in interviews. Tech is a kind of a laid-back industry, and that's awesome. I embrace that. I love to wear a hoodie and work in my pajamas at home some days. But don't go to an interview without showering, with dirty laundry. I've really seen this. I kid you not. People who are senior developers at companies have come and I've interviewed with them, and they clearly hadn't showered and wore a logo T-shirt and a baseball cap. It says a lot. I think there's kind of two forms of judgment that come here. One is just a very kind of mean and unfair human judgment where they look at you and say, oh, you must not have your shit together. I don't think that's necessarily fair, and I don't prescribe to that. I don't want to be judgmental like that. But I also have to consider that when I interview a candidate, I will have to put that candidate in front of my clients that I work with. And some of my clients are the executive suites from Fortune 100 companies. I'm not going to put you in front of that. So I might like you. I might think, hey, you showed up in a baseball cap for my favorite team, and you were cool. Let's go grab a beer after this interview. But I'm not going to want to work with you. So professionalism really goes a long way. Yes. All right. So some strategies for success. Now that we've kind of gone over some of the myths and things not to do. Learn to talk about code. You got to learn to talk. It's part of the aging process. So talking about code is really hard because it's an abstracted thing, right? We have all of these really large, strange abstractions of classes and enumeration and object models and functional versus imperative and all of this lingo to describe really abstract things. If you can't explain to somebody what it is you're building, you're really going to struggle to work with your coworkers that are also engineers, and then also to collaborate with people that are non-technical, a designer or an executive or a manager. I have to be able to explain to them what I am doing. And that's a really basic fundamental skill that's really important. So use the lingo and expose yourself to it. Read Medium articles. When you're working with people at code schools, do you guys peer program here at the Tech Academy? No. So find time in your day to explain what you've built to somebody else. Even if it's 5-10 minutes where you're like, hey, I wrote these cool couple functions. Can I just tell you about it, right? This is a really great skill. It's going to help you in interviews a lot. Generally, when I'm interviewing junior and entry level, one of the big things I'm looking for is how comfortable are they talking about code, right? I don't necessarily care that they have all the right answers to the questions I ask, but if they're comfortable having a discussion with it, I know that I can then work with them in my day-to-day. So learning to talk about code, it's going to prep you for interviews. It's going to make you an effective collaborator. It's going to accelerate your growth too. If you can't explain it, then you don't understand it well enough. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So even if you're maybe just explaining it to yourself in your own head, try to see if you can break down these big concepts. My next bit of advice, so the first one is learn how to talk about code. My second bit of advice is talk about code. Find a way to broadcast your skills and what you're working about. Write about it on LinkedIn. write about it on Twitter, share it with your classmates, tell your family. Excitement is super contagious. People are going to notice that you're doing this thing, and this is a way to network without networking, right? Like, you never know. If I might be really excited about something I built, and I talk to a friend of mine, and the next week they happen to be talking to somebody who works at a tech company and needs a job, and they're like, yeah, I don't even know how code works, but this guy that I talked to is really excited about it. You should interview him. That's how you can kind of get ahead on these sorts of things. Yeah, so talk about code. Actually get out there. Have a community. Find some sort of community that you interact with and you can feel supported and not feel like you're in a vacuum. Tech can be very, very isolating. It is a job where you spend many hours sitting and staring at a screen, which can be really hard. Yeah, go find a community. This can be different for different people. For some folks, this is having some coworkers that you hang out with. For others, it's being very active on Twitter or LinkedIn. For other people, maybe joining some Slack channels. There's Slack channels. For example, there's a React.js Slack channel for Portland, right? So if you like React and JavaScript, there's a Slack channel and they have conversations all day long on there. There's a jobs channel on there. There's like help me with code. There's like a random channel, right? So there are these communities out there, and they want you to be part of their community. They want to take in new people. They want to grow. Tech is really cool in that this is very much a team sport. Like, people want to do this together. So take advantage of that. You're going to get a lot of support. You're going to find education. And you're going to find opportunities by doing that. Improve your processes and learn your tools. I think that we have a lot of focus in this industry on how writing what the code is that you're writing, as opposed to how are you writing code, right? So what this means is, like, do you really understand all the functionalities of your text editor and your IDE? Do you know how to quickly select code that repeats in an HTML file without having to like slowly do it with your mouse? Do you know how to rapidly search for something on Google? All of these things sound like little things, but each of those operations, for example, copying and pasting something, if I can find a way that does that 10, 15 seconds faster, and then I do that 5 times a day, times 5 days in a week, times 50 weeks in a year, I've done like back of the napkin calculations, and it came out to like 200 hours. That's a month and a half of work, right? So if I were to go to someone and say, hey, I found a way to give you an extra 200 hours of just free time to educate yourself, how much faster do you think your careers would grow? A lot faster. That's a lot of education time, right? So learn your tools, be efficient and effective at writing code and searching articles. Knowledge management is another great example of that. How are you storing links to interesting articles? If you don't have a good way to do that, and you're spending a couple minutes, or 15 minutes searching for an article you found 4 weeks ago, when it could just be in your bookmark bar, that's time that you're wasting. So being efficient it's something that will pay huge dividends in the long run. It's kind of like interest, right? If you put money in a bank, you're just entering a small amount of interest every year. You can come back 10 years later and you're like, wow, that actually got me a lot of value by doing that. Here's another one that unfortunately was viable. I made the caucus thing, and I have to put this up here. But it is a thing in tech. So I'm just going to say it. Please don't be an asshole. There's a lot of mean people in tech. For some people, it's a little bit of an ego game. And that does not translate well. I'd actually say this is pretty good life advice in general. Yes. the tech scene is smaller than you think. There's people in this industry, I think probably the average span at a company is like 2.5, 3 years. So there's like decent turnover. You'd be surprised who's worked with whom and the reputations that get around. I've definitely interviewed people that were really nice, and then I jumped on LinkedIn and I found out that somebody I went to code school worked with them at their previous company. And I'll send them a message. I'll be, say, hey, what do you think of person so and so? And they'll say, oh yeah, that guy's a jerk. I don't care how great your code skills are, you're not going to get hired if you're a jerk. So the inverse of this is also very true. If you are a nice person, you will get noticed. So go out, be helpful, be collaborative, offer your time and support to others. That is a really fast way to get noticed. It's something I did. I think it helped me a lot. The person who steps up and offers to help is going to be the most ideal entry-level, junior-level developer that I could find. I want somebody who's excited to work with me and will constantly offer to help. That's the type of person that's really easy to train and keep motivated and bring along, and the type of coworker you want to work with. So, be the coworker you want to work with. Don't be mean. Leverage all your skills. I think I have the wrong image here. There was supposed to be a cool image for that one. So a successful software developer does a lot more in their day-to-day job than just writing code. I talk to clients, I work with coworkers, I have to write well, I have to write technical documentation, I have to manage my own time. I have to sell clients on the viability of the solutions that I offer. I have to sell them on the value of the things I have built for them. All of these things are really valuable skills. And as I was saying earlier, software development isn't happening in a vacuum, and those skills are fundamental for the company to be successful. I don't care how awesome the code is you write, if you can't explain to your client what it does or why it's good or why they should use it, that project will fail. So what I would say is kind of a tool for you as you're going into this market is to really, really think outside of the box when it comes to determining your value. So before I was a software developer, I worked in the environmental field as a botanist. I was very good at identifying grasses. And I led a lot of kindergartners and middle school and high schoolers in planting trees. And on the surface, that's a very untranslatable job skill into writing code, right? I'm not gonna be like, well, if the code is based on grasses, then I'm set. But what that did give me is, for example, I had a lot of leadership skills. I could take a group of people and focus them on one goal and initiative. I have really good, I need to update that apparently. Oh, thank you. I had all these other skills. For example, I had learned a lot about the power of creating a narrative and your ability to sell people on your vision. That's something I use a lot with my clients in my day-to-day, right? If I learned that statistics don't sell in the same way a story does, right? So I don't go to my clients and say, oh, I made your builds 37.78% more efficient. Not the most convincing sell. But if I go to them and I say, hey, I heard from your developers that they're really just being slowed down by the build process. And so I found a way to speed that up so they can have a lot more efficient cycles, and Johnny down in development is really just loving this new improvement. That's the type of thing that a project manager is gonna love if I tell them, right? So think about your other skills that you're bringing to the table when you go into the tech field. They're gonna be really, really valuable, and I'm sure everybody here has skills. if we were to sit and talk, like after a while, I'm sure I could get them out of you. Like, what have you done previously? Well, you actually have an ability, to lead people or to communicate well or to self-organize. I like that I wrote under benefits here for leveraging all your skills. You'll be a wizard. That's cool. Everyone likes working with a wizard. All right. If you want a job, tell people. So this is kind of a goofy one to put out there, but apply to jobs. Tell others that you are actively looking for a job, even if they are not at a tech company or not a hiring manager. We all know people secondhand. Consider using recruiters or staffing agencies, something that works for you. Engage your community. Go post on LinkedIn that you're looking for a job. Get out there. It's surprising, but I've actually met quite a few people who, they're on this track. They've gone through code school, and they're like, "Hey, Joe, I really am struggling to get a job. I just can't find any jobs." And I say, "Hey, come to this meetup with me." And we'll go to a meetup. And at the beginning of the meetup, somebody will stand up and say, "Hey, I work for company X and we're hiring." And then at the end of the night, I'll go up to my friend. I said, "Did you talk to that person?" And they're like, "No." Like, why? And they're like, "Well, I don't know. My resume isn't perfect." It's don't do that. Just jump in. Your portfolio and your resume and GitHub does not need to be perfect. It will never be perfect. That is the biggest procrastination excuse. I use it as well. Just get out there, tell people what you're interested in doing, and be excited and enthusiastic. And yeah, it's if people know you're looking for a job, it will happen. There are a lot of jobs in the tech industry right now. There's a lot of need for talent, so do apply to jobs. All right, so that kind of wraps up most of my talk. I'm going to leave a bunch of time now just for open-ended questions. Anything on the talk, questions you might have about the industry, what it is I do in my day-to-day, stuff like that. I'm happy to answer anything.
Yeah, I guess I have a question. Maybe are there any specific meetups that you really like that would be good to check out?
Sure. Some of my favorite ones actually recently kind of went away, which is sad. I like front-end PDX quite a bit. The React.js meetup is really good. I know PDX Women in Tech run a lot of really cool events that only a very small subset of their events do they kind of specifically say, we only want women here. Generally, they're actually pretty open. I think that if you have a specific interest in a language or an area in the field, there's really good meetups that are more geared towards that specific thing. So there's a Ruby meetup that's really good. I think there's a design UI meetup. So searching meetup.com is a really good way to go about that. Sure.
I have another group that have the Portland Python Pirates. They meet here every other Tuesday. So
Fun.
they do coding challenges and they have speakers come through. So that's another good opportunity.
And try a couple different ones because they're all a little bit different. Some of them are very much geared towards presenters. Some of them are more we get together and hack. There's some that are we get together at a bar and drink beers and don't really talk tech. But find the one that you feel most comfortable with, and then go consistently. Going once, a lot of these meetups will have a percentage of people that kind of show up once and then disappear. If you show up consistently, you're much more likely to kind of be noticed.
Yeah, two others, PDX Tech meetup. They have a lot of business side, a lot of recruiters that stand up in front of 50, 60 people and say you're looking and what you do and all that kind of stuff. And you walk out of there with 4 or 5 leads at a time. Then another one that was a little smaller was Coffee Ops, which is part of the Quality Dev Ops. They meet every other Friday at Tucket at 8 in the morning. So it's a little different culture, but it's one of my favorite meetups. And the nice thing about it also is you have scheduling things like with family evenings. This one's in the morning.
Yep.
Something.
That's great advice.
I'm curious about your first job. You said, was it like a big company or like what type of company was it?
No, I worked for a very small company. It was a small agency run by a good friend of mine, and I didn't work directly for them. I worked on an hourly income, so that was part of the reason my income was very small, because I billed about 20 hours a week, which left me another 20 hours for kind of continued self-growth and education, and kind of just, to be honest, adjusting to being in the tech field. Working a 40-hour work week writing code is strenuous and tough. I came from not working as hard in the environmental field, so I very intentionally gave myself time and space to kind of adjust and get my head around what it is I wanted. I also, it felt as a very safe position, and I wanted to take the time to kind of learn about the industry to figure out what I wanted. Do I want to be a small company, a large company? Do I want to do agency? Do I want to do product? Do I want to do front end? Do I want to do back end? Those are a lot of questions, right? So, that's what I did.
Was there like a mentor at that job? You were talking about how you learned a lot at that job. Was there like a couple people or just one?
Sure, yeah, there were a couple people there. The business owner and then some senior developers there were very friendly and helpful. I collaborated a lot with them. I also had a mentor through code school, someone that I knew in the industry. That's another piece of advice that I would put out there. It's not an option for everyone, but if you can find somebody who writes code and even get them to spend like 2 hours a month at a minimum, like, hey, like once a month, can we just hop on like a video chat and drink a beer and I'll talk to you about my code, right? Like going back to this thing, like talking through code, right? If you can find a senior developer that's willing to do that with you, that will be such a huge benefit. If you can do it twice a month, even more. If you can do it once a week, you're going to be golden. So that's what I did once a week. I would hang out with my buddy, and for 3 hours, we would just drink beers, and I would tell him about all the projects and things I built. And he would give me little bits of advice and ways of thinking about it. Occasionally correct things that I learned that were wrong from code school and things like that. So I would highly suggest that.